Greetings in the name Yah, the only name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. It's Brother Arnold again. I want to make a little video about the month of Abib because a lot of people are going to be keeping it wrong. And I'll put it out here so that next year they can get on the right track. Abib, speaking of the month of Abib, that is named after the ripening of barley in northern Egypt. He says to keep the month of Abib, which means young, tender ears of barley. And all we have to do is just find out when this happens in March every year in the land of Egypt. That's when it happens. It'd be our solar month, March. It'd be March all over the world. But Exodus 12:2, he says, I wrote here, what else is there to even consider? Now, I want to go on up here to Abib will always be the month, in which the equinox occurs in, which is in March. According to Philo, who was an eyewitness during the time of the temple, was still standing, and I'll get into that if I have time. I don't like to make them too long. But on the solar-only calendar, it will be March everywhere on Earth. But the Abib, which means ripe barley, happens in different months around the Earth, and this is an absolute. It's a no-brainer. But anyhow, and that's why we must recognize the month in which the barley is Abib or ripe in northern Egypt and southern Israel, because this is where they were. They left northern part of Egypt, which brings them right across the border into the southern Israel, which is Jericho, and that's where everybody goes to hunt the barley because of what Yahweh says to Moses in Exodus 12:1 and 2, which says, Exodus 12:1 and 2, and Yahweh spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, now remember, this is where he's in the land of Egypt. This month, referring to the month is which they were the month of barley when it was in the ear, or Abib, I got Bib there, shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. That's real plain. Again, this happens, the barley in the ear happens where they were at every year in March. Conversation with farmers concerning the month of Abib. Now, here's what his conversation was. Now, I don't know what your conversation with your preacher is, but here's the conversation to the children of Israel. Now, they could not possibly keep the month of Abib barley in the same month as other regions around the world. It's just agriculturally impossible, because the barley would be Abib or ripe in different times, at different times in several different months, because the barley ripens at different times around the earth. And everyone would not be keeping the feast in the same month of March, and therefore not commemorating the correct month or season in which they left Egypt, Exodus 12:2. Therefore, only the month of Abib barley in the region where they were at will be the first month of the year for them, which happens in March each year, every year. And the rest of the world needs to also keep it in March, no matter what stage their barley is in. In Ohio, it will be in a different stage, or northern Israel will be in a different stage, and then southern Israel. But anyhow, the month of Abib means the month of young tender ears of barley. You can verify all this. So imagine what was going through the minds of these slave farmers. They knew about farming when he commanded them to keep the month of Abib. They knew what Abib meant. The month of Abib anywhere else on earth other than the month of Abib where they were at would have never entered their mind when he said in Exodus 13:4, "This day came you out in the month of Abib," talking about the Abib barley where they were at. They would not be thinking of the month of green ears of barley in Russia, Turkey, Spain, Ohio, etc., or even regions further north or south of where they were at, which could be a month or two apart, depending on how far north or south you go, but rather the month of young tender ears of barley where they were at, standing, they were at. Exodus 13:5 says, "And it shall be when Yahweh shall bring thee into the land of Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and all the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month." Talking about the month he's in there, speaking to them. And that's the month they were standing in, not in the month of April, barley, or in these other lands they were going in to possess. It is referring to the month of young tender ears of barley, or Abib, which happens in northern Egypt, which is in our solar month of March. Exodus 23:15 says, "Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed." You got to do it in the time point of the month of Abib. "For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty." Now this is a commandment of Yahweh, and time appointed is referring to the 15th of the lunar month of Abib, or young tender ears of barley. This was no great mystery, revelation, or anything. Exodus 34:18 says, "The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep 7 days. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread, as I commanded thee, in the time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib thou camest out of Egypt." Again, it's stressed that it is a commandment of Yahweh to commemorate leaving Egypt at a very specific time of the year or season of the month, which is referring to the 15th of the lunar month of Abib barley in northern Egypt, where they were at, and not the Abib barley anywhere else, unless they are on the same agricultural plain as Egypt, Jericho, South Georgia, Florida, and other places around the earth. So it'll be the same there, but they're on the same agricultural plain. Deuteronomy 16:1 says, "Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh thy God, for in the month of Abib," it's talking about Abib in northern Egypt, "Yahweh God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night." Now, he wants us to commemorate the right time and season that they were brought out of Egypt, no matter where they went on earth. Why? That's why we should fight against it, or why should we fight against it? In other words, he wants them to keep it in March, because that's the season that they brought out of Egypt. That's when it gets right there. Now, we would not want to commemorate the crucifixion on the 15th of December, or 9/11 on 8/12, or Memorial Day in some other month or day of the year. You do it at the season that he says. Listen, Exodus 9:31 says, "And the flax and the barley were smitten, for the barley was in the ear," talking about Abib, "and the flax was boiled." The word ear in this verse is the same word for Abib. Barley was Abib, ready to harvest. Leviticus 2:14 says, "And if thou offer a meat offering of thy first fruits," talking about the barley, "unto Yahweh, thou shalt offer for the meat offering of thy first fruits green ears," talking about the barley, Abib. That word ears is Abib, of corn. Corn is barley, dried by the fire. Even corn beaten out of full ears. In other words, it's got to be right. The word for ears is, its season will fluctuate, and sometimes you have to dry it by the fire, which you can't do that in the next month or so forth. But the word for ears is also the same word for Abib. You can look it up, as in Exodus 9:31. And full ears dried by the fire shows us the stage of the ripe green barley that was dried by the fire so it could be ground into flour for the meat grain offering. And it tells you what to do there in the scripture, which would be impossible in a later month of April when the ears are no longer young and tender barley, which does not fit the definition of Abib that you dried by the fire, but would be old hard ears of corn or grain dried by the sun. And of course, when you put the sickle to it, it'll fly everywhere. It'll be too late to harvest. But anyhow, the feast is to be held at a very specific time or season, and the devil will try to get us off of that specific time any way he can. He don't want us to be blessed. And why should we think when we hear the phrase in the month of Abib, or what should we think when we hear it? What should we think? The answer is we should think what the slaves, farmers, thought when they heard it. Month of young, tender ears of barley. You're talking about in northern Egypt. And not equinox, although it will be the same first month, March, in which the equinox occurs in, as Philo speaks of. In other words, Philo teaches that the month that the equinox occurs in, which is March, is the first month of the year. And he was a Levite of the Levitical priesthood who lived during the time that our Savior and the temple was still standing and the Savior walked the earth. Now, what do we know about the commandment of Yahweh and the timing of the first feast in the month of Abib? Well, the month of Abib, barley in Egypt, will commemorate the season that they left Egypt, bondage there. Not the month of Abib barley further north of Israel. You know, you could be going up north of Israel, just like South Georgia and North Georgia. The harvests come in sooner in South Georgia and Florida than they do in North Georgia. But anyhow, the month of Abib barley in Jericho, which is in the southern border of Israel, will do. In other words, northern Egypt, and you cross over the border, you're in southern Israel, Jericho, because it's on the same plain as northern Egypt. And therefore, the barley ripens in March, same as in northern Egypt. Now, it's interesting to note that Moses never speaks to the children of Israel as to how to find the first month of the year any other way than the month of Abib, talking to farmers, which means the month of young tender ears of barley. And it's understood as the first month of the year to these farmers, which happens in March. This is a no-brainer. Listen, it's so simple. Meditate on that for a while. Notice also that Yahweh not even once told the people that the month of Abib is to be found by using the great lights of Genesis 1:14. Although it can be done, and I can do it, it's easy. But that's if we understand how it works, which most people don't. So just stick with the harvest there, and you'll be okay. But both of them lines up to me. But Moses did speak to the children of Israel to keep the month of Abib. The watchword here is, which some overlook, is the word Abib. You know, they overlook it. The word Abib is key in knowing what month is first. Month is the first month of the year, and there can only be one month of Abib, or there would be major confusion. There's no young tender ears of barley where they were at. There is no young tender ears of barley where they were at in April. Could be done harvested by then. Listen, in that part of the country, it is not just any month of Abib, which means young tender ears of barley, but the month that the barley is in the ear, Abib, where they were at. And the children of Israel knew exactly what month that happened in. just like we know the month of watermelons might be in July, 4th of July and so forth. But anyhow, it's in the northern part of Egypt where they and Moses and Aaron were at. See Exodus 12:2. Notice the wisdom of Yahweh by saying, and Yahweh spake to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month. He's talking to them in the land of Egypt. So you gotta find out where that is. Listen, by saying that, he spoke to them in the land of Egypt, locks everything down, because other places on earth can manipulate their harvest by planting several months early or late in order to make the harvest come in when they want it to match their doctrine. But Yahweh had Egypt limited by the flooding of the Nile River, which overflows at a specific time, which limited the planting and harvest times. I speak of this in other places. You can look through and find it. But anyhow, in ancient Israel, they sowed barley seeds around October and harvested in March, when the sun ripened the grain. The hail smote throughout all Egypt during the month that Yahweh calls Abib. But in southern Egypt, that's down south of where they were at, the barley ripens earlier and might have already been harvested or no longer be in the Abib stage as it was in northern Egypt around March when the hail hit, where Moses and Aaron was. Therefore, the month of Abib is the month when the barley is in the young tender ear stage of Abib, where Moses was. Happens in our March, or March in that part, happens in our month of March in that part of the world. That's when it happens. Now, March is going to be March all over the world. But again, you don't keep the Abib barley where you're at. You keep it where he was at. Again, the timing of the barley in northern Egypt is equivalent to our solar month March, because that is when the sun ripens the grain in that part of the world. Even to this day, nothing's changed. It still does it. Barley is Abib in different months and places all over the world. But in Upper Egypt and in southern Israel, it is around the 1st of March. And that is why the barley hunters go to Jerusalem every time when it's close, or Jericho, which is in southern Israel. They go at this time. They go really at about the end of February and 1st of March to witness the Abib barley. That's what they do. But they don't know how to interpret Exodus 12:2, and that's I may explain this and this, and I don't know, but it was very clear to Moses and these slave farmers as to which month was the month of Abib, which Yahweh calls the first month of the year for them. And they knew exactly what solar and lunar month it happened in. Exodus 12:2 says, this month shall be unto you, the beginning of the months, it shall be the first month of the year to you. When he says this month, they knew what month they were in and what season it was. And it was the month in which the barley ripens, from which month the month gets its name from. That's why they named it Abib. He was speaking to them on the 14th day of the month. So I do get into this a little bit. Some people think he was speaking before that, but you need to look at my notes and everything. But listen, this month, when he spake these words, this month, and 5 days earlier, the barley was in the ear, or Abib. That word ear means Abib. When the hailstorm smote it, it was the month of Abib, or young tender ears of barley. When he said this month, it is referring to the month of March, at which time the barley is ripe each year where they were in northern Egypt. And therefore March is the correct season. Around the equinox there, listen, the 14th day of the lunar month will cause the exact time, will dictate the exact time to kill the Passover. To Passover it'll cause it to vary back and forth in the solar month of March. In other words, the moon will make it go to one extreme one way and one extreme the other way. But it gets everybody on the same page by the moon. Exodus 12:14 says, "And this shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to Yahweh throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever." Exodus 13:4 says, "This day came you out in the month of Abib." Exodus 13:5 says, "And it shall be when Yahweh shall bring you into the land of Canaan, of the Canaanites and the Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, thou shalt keep this service in this month." He's talking to them in a certain month and season. And this month is referring to the month of young tender ears of barley, or Abib, which happens in northern Egypt in our solar month of March. Exodus 23:15 says, "Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days as I commanded thee." It's a commandment. Listen, in the time appointed. It's got to be at the right time or season. That word, time, season, of the month of Abib. For in it thou camest out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. Now, he wants you to keep it because that's the season that he brought them out of Egypt. You can't do it by the barley somewhere else on earth. You got to do it in that season. Anyhow, I hope I'm making myself clear. I'm not going to go through all this. Sometimes I'll get redundant. This is a commandment of Yahweh, and time appointed is referring to the 15th of the month of Abib, or green ears. Time appointed is you use the moon and the sun. You know, the moon gets you on the same page. Exodus 34:18 says, "The feast of unleavened bread shall thou keep 7 days. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread as I commanded thee in the time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib thou came out of Egypt." He tells you why he wants you to do it, because that's the time and season that he brought you out of Egypt. And it's ordinance forever. Again, it's stressed that it is a commandment of Yahweh, and time of the month is referring to the 15th of the lunar month of Abib. Listen, Deuteronomy 16:1 says, "Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh thy God," or Elohim. "For in the month of Abib, Yahweh thy God brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt." He tells you why to do it. And you need to do it. It don't matter where you try. The Israelites spread all over the earth. They still keep it and commemorate that time that they come out of Egypt. They don't do it by the barley where they're at. He wants us to commemorate the right time and season that they were brought out of Egypt. Why fight against it? Now, I may be getting redundant here in a minute, but that's okay. It won't hurt some of you to hear it over and over and over again. Maybe you'll get it. Exodus 9:31 says, "And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear," or Abib, "and the flax was boiled." The word ear in this verse is the same word for Abib, barley, Abib, ready to harvest. Leviticus 2:14 says, "And if thou offer a meat offering of thy first fruits unto Yahweh, thou shalt offer for the meat offering of thy first fruits green ears," Abib, again, "of corn dried by the fire." Corn's talking about the barley. "Beaten out of full ears." It's telling you the stage of it. The word for ears is also the same word for Abib as it is in Exodus 9:31. Now, and full ears dried by the fire shows us the stage of the ripe green barley that was dried by the fire. So it could be ground into flour. You can't ground green ears, just like roasting ears of corn. You let it get hard, you can grind it, but boy, I'm sure young tender ears of grain, boiled corn is good too, you know. But listen, and you grind it in the flour for the meat offering, grain offering, which would be impossible in a later month when the ears are no longer young, tender ears of barley, which does not fit the definition of a Abib when it goes too long because it's not young and tender. If we wait until the second month of the year, we have old hard ears of barley dried by the sun instead of young tender ears of barley dried by the fire. Now Strong's Hebrew definition 24 and Strong says that Abib is from an unused root meaning to be tender, green, that is, a young ear of grain. Hence the name of the month Abib, or Nisan, Abib, ear, green ears, corn. That's where the month got its name from. So you can't have a month of green ears in the next month over in April. Now it can possibly go about 5 days in April, and the tabernacles can go about 4 or 5 days into October, but October is the 8th month. You don't keep it, but that's a different subject. Anyhow, Leviticus 2:14 says, And if thou offer a meat offering of thy first fruits unto Yahweh, thou shalt offer for the meat offering of thy first fruits green ears of corn, Abib dried by the fire, even corn being out of full ears. I done read that. The Hebrew is for beard. See, I'm getting redundant here. Exodus 12:2 speaks of the first month of the year. The Hebrew word for year is revolution. The sun makes the revolution approximately every 365 days. And I have scriptural reason to believe, and that was just that the starting and ending point of the solar revolution of the sun is when the sun comes back to the point of equal 12 hours of light and darkness, just like in creation. In creation, it said he divided between the light and darkness, made up of 2 words. In other words, equal 12 hours of light and 12 hours of dark. Well, the Roman calendar don't have that. On March 20, you do not have that. You have 13 hours of light and only 11 hours of darkness. So you back it up to creation around February 19th, and you can straighten all that out. There's equal light and darkness at that time. But anyhow, I got historical evidence and all that. I won't have time to go in all that, I don't think. But anyhow, just like in creation when the light and darkness was equally divided, the 12 hours of light beginning with the dawn, morning light, now let's catch this, and going all the way through the end of the evening dusk light. Both of these lights belong to the same day or same sun. And when the light that he called day goes away, that day begins anew at darkness. And it goes back to darkness again. This is in the revolution of the year. And the first new moon of the year, revolution, comes after this event of 12 hours of light and darkness, which happens around February 19th, not March 20. And I got proof of all this, and historical proof and nature proof, and you can look in your almanac and all. But remember the light he called day, which would include the morning dawn light all the way through the evening dusk light. But the Roman calendar does not include this light in with the day, but adds this light to the darkness in order to make their artificial calendar work. And that's why they have March 20. And when the light he calls day goes away, and I done told you, it's another 24-hour day begins at dark, just like that first day in creation began in dark. Deuteronomy 16:6 says, But at the place which Yahweh thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at evening, or that word is actually between evening, at the going down of the sun, at the season, catch it, that thou camest forth out of Egypt. That's when he wants you to do it. Anyhow, I could say a lot on that. But anyhow, timing is everything to him. He wants us to commemorate this great monumental event at the correct time or season they left Egypt, not a month later, and also commemorate it on the correct day, not a day later. The 3 feasts each year are harvest feasts and are centered around the harvest, not anything else. Once the first month is established, all the other months will automatically follow, and the 13th moon will automatically be produced by nature instead of man arbitrarily deciding to declare a 13th moon. That's just ridiculous to me. Listen, in order to fit his theology instead of letting nature do it. The 14th day, and I got a website that gives more in depth on this. If you go to my website at lunarsabbath.info, meaning information, and look under first month of the year, And of course, I put this up there too, but I put some more on this that you won't be able to see here probably. But anyhow, the 14th day of the month has plenty to do with the timing of the Passover being killed. But the equinox or anyone's opinion has nothing to do with it. In other words, when the month of Abib arrives, you count 14 days and then kill the Passover between the evenings. Now you do this by the lunar month. Nothing else matters, including the equinox. Strong's 4150 is the word for Moed or Moedim, and it means, time is from the Hebrew 3259, probably appointment. That is a fixed time or season, specifically a festival. Find out what Abib means and then what month it occurs in Egypt there, and it will be the month of Abib. No further instructions were given by Yahweh or Moses as to the correct month. He didn't say use the great lights of Genesis 1:14, which you can if you know how to do it. But anyhow, it's another subject. But listen, again, the barley is not Abib everywhere at the same time on earth. Therefore, we must know where the people were when Yahweh said, this month is the first month of the year to you. Exodus 12:2. The barley is Abib in March in northern Egypt, where Moses and Aaron was, and in southern part of Israel, talking about around Jericho, when they came into the land. But the further north we go, on up into Egypt, the barley is not Abib until April, sometimes May maybe over there. And then May, etc. But no matter where they go after the season of leaving Egypt is established in Exodus 12:2, they are to commemorate the month of Abib in March, the season that they were delivered from Egypt, not April, May, June, or whatever, from year to year, and it's the solar month of March all over the world. The month that the barley was Abib in northern Egypt, March, is the month of Abib for the people of Yahweh to commemorate all over the world. When we read the above verses as to when and what month we are commanded to keep his feast in, the commandment is very plain and straightforward, and there's absolutely nothing else to even consider. The Egyptians recognized 3 seasons, and he's got the flooding season, and I could go into this in June, this and that and the other, but after the flooding waters reduced, the growing season lasted from October to February. Farmers plowed and planted seeds in the field, which were irrigated and so forth. And I give you the website. You can look at this when the Nile River, and it's from March through May or something, what I got here. But according to Pliny, he lived way back yonder. The barley is reaped in the 6th month. Now you count October as the 1st, September, October, November, December, January, February, March would be the 6th month. That's when he said the barley is reaped. But anyhow, it's ripe about the end of February or beginning of March. You see there where he said that? The wheat at the end of March, and he's talking about there's 2 different wheat harvests, or beginning of April. The flax is in flower at the end of January in the neighborhood of Alexander, talking about Alexander, Egypt. The sowing time in ancient Egypt would begin in October in the 6th month. Harvest would be in March, which would be the 7th or 6th month if you counted October. Anyhow, Pliny observes, and it tells you where to get it, that in Egypt, the barley is ready for reaping in 6 months after it is sown. So you sow it, say, at the beginning of October, you'll count October, and 6th month would be March. And wheat in 7. And so this is documented. Albert Barnes notes on Exodus 9:31 says, the flax was boiled, it's got in blossom. This marks the time in the north of Egypt the barley ripens and flax blossoms about the middle of February or at the latest early March. You get that? And both are gathered in before April, it says. And I got the end. But anyhow, the Hebrew definition, I'm going to read a little bit more. Let's see how much time I've spent. Man, I done spent 34 minutes. But the Hebrew definition of year, years in, next is so forth, Strong's 86:22. And it says a revolution, that is, of the sun, course of time, lapse, circuit, come about in. If Tekufa is referring to the autumnal equinox, which happens in September, in the 7th month, September means 7, and the Greek Septuagint on Exodus 34:22 actually says to keep the feast in the middle of the year, or middle of the revolution or circuit, which is in September. Then the other end of the circuit is at the spring equinox, which is in March, and has to be the first month when the first month feast is held. The fall feast is in the middle or halfway point, since the autumnal equinox is the halfway point of the circuit. That only reaches its full circus at the vernal equinox, and this has to be the 1st and 7th month in which Philo teaches the feast are to be kept. And I got all this information. Here it is right here, the 5th festival. It's in 28:150. And it says, there is another festival combined with the feast of Passover, having a use of food different from the usual one, and not customary, the use namely of unleavened bread, from which it derives its name. And there are 2 accounts given of this festival, the one particular to the notion on account of the migration already described, talking about leaving Egypt, the other a common one in accordance with conformity to nature and with the harmony of the whole world. And we must consider how accurate the hypocrisy is, this month being the 7th, both in number and order, according to revelations of the sun, is the first in power, on which account it is also called the first in the sacred scriptures. And the reason, as I imagine, is as followed. The vernal equinox, notice he mentioned vernal equinox, is connected with the first month. Now, it is an imitation and representation of the beginning in accordance with which this world was created. Accordingly, every year God reminds men of the creation of the world, and with this view puts forward the spring, in which seasons all plants flourish and bloom, for which reason this is very correctly set down in the law as the first month.